My name is Imani Thompson and I am 32 years old. This past Thanksgiving, my father screamed that I was not his daughter. My mother concurred. They ordered me to leave the house, the very house my earnings had been secretly sustaining. They were unaware their favoured son, my brother, was a sham. They did not know I possessed the evidence, and they certainly could not have anticipated that by Friday morning foreclosure notices and police officers would arrive at their doorstep. Before I recount how one catastrophic dinner unravelled a lifetime of poisonous deceit, let me know in the comments where you are watching from, and if you have ever been the silent one in your family, the one who resolved every crisis while others claimed the glory. Please hit like and subscribe. This is what occurs when the family scapegoat ceases to foot the bills and chooses instead to present an invoice. The aroma of brown sugar-glazed ham and collard greens typically soothes me, but not that day. It felt oppressive, stifling. Thanksgiving at my parents' Atlanta home was never about gratitude. It was a performance. Our family, the Thompsons, were community pillars, or so my parents urgently needed everyone to believe. My father, Elijah, presided at the head of the long, polished mahogany table, exuding an unearned pride. My mother, Brenda, sat to his right, her gaze fixed as always on her son. My brother, Marcus, aged 35, raised his glass, radiating charisma in a $1,000 suit, a brilliant smile plastered on his face. And so, he announced, I informed the CEO, if you desire the best, you must invest in the best. Just like that, a $500,000 contract. Sealed. My mother, Brenda, clasped her hands, her eyes glistening. Oh, Marcus, my precious boy, you are and always will be this family's pride. She was fixated on status, on our appearance to other families in her social circle. Ashley, she said, turning to my sister-in-law, you are so fortunate to have him. Ashley, who is white, flashed her brand new Cartier watch, a dazzling gleam of gold and diamonds. He spoils me endlessly, she cooed, leaning into him. She adored this role, the refined wife of the triumphant black entrepreneur. She savoured the position it afforded her and never let me forget it. This was our family script. Marcus was the star, the heir to the Thompson legacy. I was merely Imani, the 32-year-old dull one, the one with the secure occupation. As a financial risk analyst, I existed in spreadsheets and data, a world my family found incomprehensible and tedious. I lived in a rented downtown high-rise, a choice they viewed as a failure, compared to the sprawling suburban homes they believed we should own. My father's attention finally shifted from his son, and his gaze landed on me like a physical weight. The warmth vanished from his face. And you, Imani? His voice sliced through the adulation. Still shuffling papers at that tedious downtown job? Heat flushed my cheeks. Every eye at the table turned to me. 32 years old, he continued, voice dripping with contempt. No husband, no children, still in that tiny apartment. Don't you feel ashamed looking at your brother, at his accomplishments? Ashamed? I recalled the call I made last month, quietly refinancing my own condominium, not an apartment, to cover Marcus's unexpected business loss, which I knew was a series of failed gambles. I kept my voice utterly flat, utterly calm. My job is satisfactory, Dad. It covers expenses. It covers expenses. Those 4 words ignited the fuse. Elijah slammed his fork onto his expensive china. The sound cracked through the room. Covers expenses? He bellowed. Don't you dare adopt that tone with me. You believe the pittance you send your mother monthly grants you the right to talk back? A pittance? I was covering the $600 monthly premium for their premium health insurance. the one Marcus had overlooked after restructuring their finances, Elijah was just beginning. Do you have any conception of genuine success? Your brother, he declared, gesturing toward Marcus as if presenting royalty, just wrote a check for $20,000 to sponsor us this month, simply because that is what a true child does. My blood turned to ice. $20,000. I froze, my fork midway to my mouth. I knew precisely the origin of that $20,000. It was not from a $500,000 deal. It was drawn from a new line of credit on this very house, a line of credit I had explicitly warned them against opening. I had seen the credit bureau alert just last week. Marcus had not given them $20,000. He had pilfered $20,000 of their home equity and presented it as a gift, and they were thanking him for it. I attempted to keep my voice low. $20,000? Dad, do you even understand where that money— Silence! He roared, his face a dangerous crimson. This is Thanksgiving. My day. You are perpetually like this. Consumed by envy, you cannot bear to witness your brother's success, can you? I looked to my mother for support, for any sign of solidarity. She merely shook her head, her face a mask of profound disappointment, but not in him, in me. She leaned in, her voice a venomous whisper. You're distressing your father, Imani. Cease ruining the holiday. You're simply jealous of Marcus. You always have been. Jealous? That term had defined my entire existence. When I gained admission to Spelman on a full academic scholarship, I was just jealous of Marcus's networking prowess at Morehouse, a school my father paid for in full. When I earned my first promotion at the bank, I was jealous that Marcus was courageous enough to launch his own business, a venture my father provided seed money for. To them, my quiet, steady, authentic achievements were an affront. Marcus's loud, flashy, fraudulent failures, which I was perpetually, secretly summoned to rectify, were celebrated as bold risk-taking. I was the family's clandestine accountant and its public failure. Ashley, the sister-in-law, decided her moment to twist the knife had arrived. She placed her pale, delicate hand on my arm, her manicured nails a stark contrast to my dark skin. Oh, Imani, she said, her voice saturated with faux saccharine sympathy. I realize it must be so difficult, truly. Observing others, I mean observing Marcus, simply attain everything so effortlessly. It must be exasperating, but you needn't attempt to undermine him. It appears so desperate. Desperate. That was the final straw. I looked from her perfectly styled blonde hair to the new Cartier watch on her wrist, the watch for which I had received a fraud alert 3 days prior, the one bought with a credit card opened in my mother's name, without her knowledge. I looked her directly in the eye. My voice was no longer quiet. Desperate? Are you even aware of what he utilized to purchase that watch you're flaunting? Ashley? The table fell deathly silent. Ashley's practiced smile wavered. I saw Marcus's eyes widen in pure panic. But it was my father who detonated. Enough! He stood so swiftly his heavy oak chair shrieked backward, nearly toppling. His face was purple with fury. He pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at my face. I don't comprehend why I even raised you, he screamed, his voice cracking. You bear no resemblance to me. You possess no ambition. You are not my child. Depart from my home. You are not my child. The words simply hung in the air. This was it, the ultimate fatal incision after a lifetime of 1,000 minor lacerations. I don't care, he continued to roar as I sat motionless. Leave. Settling a few bills does not constitute you as family. I scanned the table. My mother, Brenda, and my sister-in-law, Ashley, were smiling, a small, satisfied smirk. They had prevailed. Marcus appeared visibly relieved, believing he had narrowly escaped disaster. And in that instant, something within me did not fracture. It clicked, it solidified. It became cold, hard, and perfectly terrifyingly clear. I did not cry. I smiled, a serene, weary, conclusive smile. "You are correct, Dad," I said, my voice suddenly crystalline. "I should not be here. I am weary of not being family." I stood slowly, deliberately. I retrieved my purse from the floor. I am weary of not being family, yet still being expected to finance the celebration. I reached into my purse. I withdrew a single folded sheet of paper. I tossed it onto the center of the table, directly atop the ruined turkey. It was an invoice. "This," I announced to the silent room, "is the bill for $10,600 for this entire dinner, the catering, the floral arrangements, the expensive wine you are consuming, Marcus." I looked directly at my mother, whose mouth was agape. "I was required to settle it this morning, Mum, on my personal American Express card, because your credit card, the one Marcus manages for you, was declined." I then turned my gaze to my brother. His face was a sickly grey. He was perspiring. "You are correct, Dad," I said, my voice sweet as venom. "I should not have to pay for it." I turned back to Marcus. "So, Marcus, since you are the genuine family, and since you just signed that substantial $20,000 check, why don't you reimburse me my $10,600 immediately?" Complete, dead, agonizing silence. No one moved, no one breathed. I turned and walked to the grand front door. I did not slam it. I opened it, stepped into the cold November air, and closed it gently behind me. I left them all in that cold, expensive, silent room, staring at a bill not a single one of them could pay. The following morning I awoke before sunrise. I had not truly slept, yet I was not fatigued. For the first time in my entire adult life, I felt weightless. The prior night had not been an act of anger. It had been an act of liberation. I walked to my floor-to-ceiling windows, holding a warm mug of coffee. My father had derided my home as a tiny apartment. He had never once visited. He had no idea I owned this penthouse condominium in Buckhead, overlooking the entire Atlanta skyline. He never bothered to inquire. Friday, Black Friday. For my mother, Brenda, this was the high holy day. It was the Super Bowl of her religion, rabid, competitive consumerism. My phone, charging on the marble kitchen island, began to vibrate. The screen illuminated "Mom." I watched it vibrate, the sound unnervingly loud in my apartment's quiet. It ceased. A moment later, it buzzed again. "Mom!" And again, I counted 12 missed calls within 10 minutes. I knew. Oh, I knew exactly why she was calling. She was not calling to apologize. She was not calling to ascertain my safety. She was calling from the checkout line at Lenox Square, likely at Neiman Marcus or Saks, clutching a stack of designer attire. She was calling because the credit card she was presenting, the one bearing her name but linked to my bank account, had just been declined. A younger Imani, the one from merely 24 hours prior, would have felt a sharp, stabbing guilt. Her heart would have pounded. She would have answered, "I am so sorry, Mum, allow me to rectify it, just one final time." But the Imani who had walked out that door, she simply took a slow sip of her coffee. It tasted of freedom. I placed the phone on Do Not Disturb and watched the sun begin to burn the fog from the skyscrapers. I had work to do. The previous night, I had simply ceased payment. That morning, I would commence collection. I did not need to be present to envision the chaos. I could picture it perfectly. My mother, Brenda, adorned in her finest, a fur-trimmed coat and designer sunglasses perched on her head, thrusting her card at the young cashier. "Attempt it again." she would hiss, her voice low and furious. There must be an issue with your system. The cashier, polite yet firm. I apologize, ma'am. This card has been declined. All of them. I could feel the hot flush of public humiliation she must be experiencing. The line of impatient, judgmental shoppers behind her. Her, Brenda Thompson, spouse of the successful Elijah Thompson, mother of the prodigy Marcus, being declined. I retrieved my phone an hour later, just as anticipated, a sequence of frantic voicemails. I pressed play on the most recent. Amani, answer this phone immediately. Her voice was a shriek, high-pitched and vibrating with rage. My card is non-functional. They declined me at Neiman Marcus, before everyone, before Janet Howard. Do you comprehend the embarrassment? What have you done? What have you done to my cards? Rectify this now, you ungrateful. The voicemail terminated, the time limit reached. I could envision the frantic scene at their house, where she had undoubtedly driven empty-handed to scream at my father. Elijah, his pride still shattered from last night, would be pacing the marble foyer of his home, the home whose mortgage I was paying. That ungrateful girl, he would be roaring. She dared to sever us. After all I provided, I shall disown her. I shall remove her from the will. His threats were hollow, laughable. The will, what will? I was the will. I was the estate. I was the sole barrier between the Thompson legacy and total absolute financial ruin, and he had just informed me I was not his child. But the credit cards, that was merely the commencement. That was the minor irritating tremor preceding the genuine earthquake. I had not merely cancelled her shopping allowance, I had also, quite deliberately, terminated the automatic payment for her vehicle, the pearl-white Lexus ES 350, the one she required to outshine her friends at her weekly bridge game, the one Marcus had negotiated a lease for, a predatory lease with ballooning interest rates that I had been quietly settling for 2 years. Approximately now, as she was likely in the kitchen, fuming, the next act would arrive. A large, unsightly yellow tow truck, reversing into their pristine, HOA-approved, brick-paved driveway. The neighbours, the very individuals my mother lived to impress, would be peering through their blinds. This was my mother's ultimate nightmare. I could hear her shriek. I could see her dashing out the front door, waving her arms. "What are you doing? Remove that contraption from my driveway. You cannot be here. You are damaging the pavement." And the tow truck driver, a man simply performing his job, clipboard in hand, would regard her utterly unfazed. "Ma'am, I am here for the Lexus. Repossession order. Payments are 3 months delinquent." Delinquent? That is impossible. She would be screaming now, her voice echoing through the quiet cul-de-sac. A mistake exists. My son Marcus handles all finances. He paid this, or my daughter. Imani, this is her fault. She is supposed to pay this. And there it was, that toxic, suffocating phrase. She is supposed to pay. Not, "Can you assist?" Not, "We are in difficulty." It was an expectation, a command. For my entire adult life, I had been a function, not a person, a walking, talking, invisible bank account. Last night, my father had finally issued my severance package. "You are not my child." Settling bills does not make you family. He was absolutely correct. It did not. I glanced at my phone. It was buzzing anew. It was Marcus this time, the golden boy himself. I smiled, let it proceed to voicemail, and took another sip of coffee. The tow truck was merely the opening act. The police and the foreclosure noted they were the headliners, and they were due to arrive at any moment. The driveway chaos intensified. My mother's shrieks regarding her Lexus were attracting precisely the attention she despised. I could picture Mrs. Jenkins from 2 doors down, the neighbourhood gossip, obtaining a front row view of the Thompson family's sudden, spectacular collapse. Brenda, my mother, was so occupied arguing with the tow truck driver that she failed to notice the 2 police cruisers arriving, their blue and red lights flashing silently, painting the brick facade in strokes of crimson and azure. My father, Elijah, would have heard the commotion. He would have emerged from the front door, not with fear, but with pure, unadulterated indignation. How dare this occur on his property? He would see the police cars and his arrogance would instantly locate a target for his blame. Me. "What is transpiring here?" he would demand, striding onto the lawn like a monarch whose court was in disarray. "Officers, what is the meaning of this? Did Imani contact you? Is this harassment?" A tall, stern police officer would exit, his hand resting calmly on his belt. He would not be intimidated by my father's bluster. He had encountered men like Elijah countless times. "Good morning, sir," the officer would state, his voice polite, professional, and utterly cold. "We are not present for a disturbance. We are simply maintaining peace. This gentleman," he would add, motioning to the man emerging from behind the other police car, "possesses official documents to serve to an Elijah and a Brenda Thompson." This new individual was the genuine threat. He was not an officer. He was a man in a rumpled, inexpensive suit, clutching a thick 9x12 manila envelope. He was a process server. He was the chaos I had awaited. He approached my parents, his expression impassive. "Elijah Thompson? Brenda Thompson?" My mother, momentarily silenced, would merely nod, her eyes wide with terror. The man handed the thick packet to my father. "You have been served." My father accepted the envelope as if it were a serpent. He stared at it. "Served? What is this? A lawsuit? Did that girl sue us?" The process server simply shook his head. "Have a pleasant day, sir." He turned, re-entered his car, and departed, leaving the 2 police officers to observe as my father, with trembling hands, tore open the seal. "Brenda," my father would whisper, his voice suddenly diminutive. "Brenda, what is this?" My mother would snatch the papers from him. Her eyes would scan the bold, terrifying heading atop the first page. "Notice of accelerated foreclosure." "Foreclosure!" she would shriek, the word tearing from her. "Impossible! A falsehood! We settled this house. We settled it 20 years ago. An error exists, a dreadful error." My father would be shaking his head, his face a ghostly grey. He would be reading further down the page, his eyes fixed on the details my mother, in her panic, had missed. "No, Brenda, it states we obtained a second mortgage, a business loan, 6 months ago." He looked up, his eyes hollow. "Brenda, it states we borrowed $300,000. 300? My mother could not even complete the word. "Against this house," my father concluded, his voice a hoarse whisper. He continued reading, and then his body stiffened. "The loan was issued to Thompson Legacy Consulting." Thompson Legacy Consulting, the name of my brother's company, the fictitious shell corporation he utilized to channel their funds, and apparently now their home. Both of them, as if pulled by a single string, turned their heads. Marcus. He was finally emerging from the house, rubbing sleep from his eyes, a silk robe draped over his shoulders, annoyed his morning had been disrupted. "What is all this noise? I am attempting to rest. Did you manage that vehicle situation?" My mother, Brenda, walked toward him slowly, as if in a trance. She was holding the foreclosure notice. "Marcus?" she inquired, her voice a tiny, shattered thing I had never heard before. "What is this, darling? They claim the house is being foreclosed." She held the paper toward him. It states, Thompson Legacy Consulting. Marcus, what have you done? Her voice was rising, hysteria infiltrating. You informed us that was merely. You stated it was simply paperwork. A business guarantee. You claimed it was routine. Marcus's eyes darted from the paper to the police officers, still observing, to the tow truck, now hitching its chain to the Lexus. The mask, the charm, the suits, the $500,000 contracts. It all evaporated in the morning sun. He was merely a pampered, terrified, 35-year-old boy who had finally been apprehended. He began to stammer, retreating. It is merely a cash flow issue. Temporary. I can resolve this. I can resolve it. He looked wildly between my parents, his eyes landing on my mother. Mom, contact Imani. Contact your daughter. Instruct her to rectify this. Instruct her to pay it. Contact Imani. Now. And just as Marcus was screaming my name, his voice cracking in panic, a car pulled to the curb. It was not loud. It simply appeared. A silent, sleek black Tesla Model S. A vehicle my family had never seen. A vehicle they did not even know I owned, because in their perception I was merely the daughter with the tiny apartment and the tedious job. The driver's door opened and I stepped out. I was not attired in the garments of the sorrowful, overlooked daughter from Thanksgiving. I was wearing my armor, a sharp navy blue power suit, impeccably tailored. My hair was drawn back into a severe, elegant bun. I wore my darkest, most expensive sunglasses. I appeared precisely as I was, a senior financial risk analyst, present to liquidate a portfolio of deficient assets. My father, Elijah, saw me, and his fear instantly evaporated, supplanted by the familiar, comfortable mask of his rage. This was the sole manner he knew to address me. He pointed that trembling finger, the one clutching the foreclosure notice. You! He roared, his voice echoing across the manicured lawns. You orchestrated this. You planned all of this. You are behind this. You ungrateful. The police officers tensed, observing the confrontation. The tow truck driver paused. My mother looked at me, her face a horrible mask of desperate hope, as if I were a magician arriving to make the tow truck, the police, and the foreclosure notice all vanish. I walked slowly up the stone path, my heels clicking with a rhythm resembling a ticking clock. I halted directly before him, sufficiently close that he could perceive his own furious, distorted reflection in my sunglasses. I calmly removed the glasses, folded them, and looked him directly in the eye. My voice was glacial. It did not waver. No, Dad, I said, my voice slicing cleanly through his shouting. I did not orchestrate any of this. I paused, allowing the silence to hang for 1, 2, 3 seconds. I simply ceased. He stared at me, his mouth agape, the accusation dying on his lips. Ceased? Affirmative, I ceased. This was the second slap, the one far more brutal than the $10,600 dinner invoice. I ceased paying the $5,200, I stated, my voice level, that has been auto-drafted from my checking account on the 1st of each month for the preceding 5 months to cover the $300,000 mortgage you are holding. The one Marcus informed you was merely a business guarantee. My mother emitted a tiny gasp. 5,000? I ceased paying the $900 monthly lease payment for that pearl white Lexus, I said, nodding toward the tow truck now lowering the vehicle onto the street. The one Marcus negotiated for you, which has been delinquent for the preceding 3 months, until I once again intervened. I ceased paying, I continued, shifting my gaze to where Ashley, my sister-in-law, was now concealed behind Marcos. For the American Express Platinum card, the one Ashley has been utilizing for her shopping excursions to Phipps Plaza. Another $4,000 this month alone. I finally regarded my brother, Marcus, the golden boy. He appeared green. He was perspiring through his silk robe on a cold November morning. And I ceased funding you, I stated to him directly. That $20,000 check you so magnanimously sponsored, Mum and Dad, with? That originated from my retirement account. I transferred it to you solely so you could appear favorable to them, so you could perpetuate this entire pathetic falsehood for one additional month. The air rushed from my father's lungs. My mother appeared as if she might faint. Last night, I said, returning my attention to my father, you informed me I was not your child. You screamed it. You declared settling bills does not make me family. I, he stammered. I decided, I said, that for the inaugural time in my life, I would believe you. Therefore, I returned home, and I made one telephone call to my bank. I am an excellent client. I cancelled every single automatic payment, every transfer, every safety net I had secretly established to shield this family from Marcus, to protect you from yourselves. My mother, Brenda, finally collapsed. The pride, the arrogance, it all shattered. She stumbled forward, seizing my suit sleeve, her face a mess of tears and panic. No, no, Imani, darling, no, she sobbed. We did not intend it. Your father, he was merely furious. You know his temperament. You must rescue us. You must rectify this. Please, Imani, please. I glanced down at her hand on my arm. I did not move. I did not console her. Rectify what, Mom? I inquired. The $10,600 last night was merely for the gathering. That was a rounding error. I looked up, ensuring all of them, my father, my mother, my brother, and his wife, could hear my subsequent words. Within the preceding 6 months alone, I have personally covered $114,000 of Marcus's debts, of his fraud. Ashley emitted a sound, a small squeak of pure terror, and regarded Marcus with an expression of absolute horror. She finally comprehended. My father, Elijah, that proud, arrogant man, appeared to have aged 20 years within 20 seconds. He was leaning against the brick pillar of his porch, his knuckles white. But the storm I had unleashed was not concluded. Not remotely. They stood there contemplating the financial ruin. They believed this was solely about debt. They believed this was the worst possible outcome. They were unaware the chaos I had promised possessed another designation. They were unaware the subsequent phase was criminal. Several days later, they occupied a room diametrically opposed to their chaotic home. It was a glass-walled conference room on the 40th floor of a Buckhead skyscraper. The office of Ms. Davis, my attorney. The atmosphere was cold, the furniture minimalist and expensive, and the city view infinite. My family appeared diminutive. They looked haggard, cheap, and utterly misplaced. Elijah, Brenda, Marcus, and Ashley occupied one side of an immense granite table. I sat on the opposite side, adjacent to Miss Davis, a sharp, elder black woman in a crisp grey suit, who regarded them as a clerical error. My mother, Brenda, initiated. The tears were instantaneous, a performance perfected over a lifetime. Imani, she sobbed, dabbing her eyes with a crumpled tissue. Imani, darling, you must assist us. You must salvage us. They will seize the house. Your father and I, we shall be destitute. You cannot permit this. You cannot permit your own parents to be homeless. I simply observed her. I felt nothing, no pity, no anger, merely emptiness. My father, Elijah, could not endure her pleading. He slammed his hand onto the granite table, causing Ashley to jump. Enough, Brenda! Cease begging! This girl is indebted to us. He spat, pointing at me. We reared her, we nourished her, we sheltered her. She bears a responsibility to us. It is her obligation to rectify this. He was still attempting to issue commands. Even now, confronting total ruin, his arrogance was his sole remaining possession. Before I could respond, Miss Davis leaned forward, placing her hands flat on the table. Her voice was not loud, but it sliced through my father's bluster like a scalpel. "Mr. Thompson," she declared, her voice like polished steel, "let us be perfectly, unequivocally lucid." She observed him over her glasses. "You are not present to issue demands. You are not present to discuss obligation or responsibility. You are present to listen. You are present, all of you, as debtors. You are present at the mercy of my client, Ms. Imani Thompson, the very individual you and your son have been defrauding for the better part of a year. The individual to whom you," she looked at Elijah and Brenda, "and you," she looked at Marcus and Ashley, "owe a significant and legally actionable sum of money." My father's mouth snapped shut. He appeared slapped. The silence was deafening. Ashley, perceiving threats and tears had failed, decided to attempt her own special tactic. She leaned forward, endeavoring to create an air of intimacy, of sisterly conspiracy. She adopted her finest, most empathetic, concerned, white friend voice. "Imani," she said, her voice soft and brimming with faux compassion. She even attempted to extend her hand across the table toward me. "Listen, please, this is merely an enormous misunderstanding. It is simply numbers." "Marcus," she stated, placing a supportive hand on his arm, He merely became slightly overwhelmed. You know his ambition. He acted for the family. For all of us." She smiled, a small, pleading smile. "We are family, Imani. Ultimately, that is paramount. We can resolve this, merely us. We do not require all these attorneys involved, correct? We can merely discuss this. Agreed?" I stared at her outstretched, pale hand. I contemplated the Cartier watch. I contemplated her smirk at the Thanksgiving table. I uttered not a word. I did not acknowledge her hand. I simply retrieved my tablet from the table before me. I tapped the screen once, activating it. Then I slid it, silently, across the polished granite. It halted directly before Marcus and Ashley. On the screen was a PDF document. The logo atop was clear. The United States Small Business Administration. It was a loan application. I finally spoke. My voice was as cold and clear as the glass walls enveloping us. "A misunderstanding, Ashley?" I inquired, looking directly at my brother. "Is that your designation for this?" Marcus's eyes were affixed to the screen. "Do you believe," I said, my voice lowering, "that forging my father's and mother's signatures on a federal loan application for a $300,000 SBA loan is a misunderstanding, Marcus?" The color drained from Ashley's face. She snatched her hand back. My father and mother appeared confused, then horrified, as they commenced to comprehend. "SBA loan?" my father stammered. What SBA loan?" "This," I said, "is where the debt transforms into a crime." My father, my mother, Marcus, Ashley, they all stared at the tablet. They believed it a bluff. They believed I was merely repeating a rumor. Ms. Davis cleared her throat. "My client," she stated, "is not a speculator. She is a forensic professional. Please, Ms. Thompson, proceed." I leaned forward. "My tedious job, Dad," I said, my voice quiet yet carrying in the dead silent room, "is not shuffling papers. I am a senior risk analyst. My entire occupation is to audit multi-million-dollar portfolios, analyze data streams, and locate anomalies. I identify patterns liars attempt to conceal. I uncover fraud for a livelihood, It is my expertise. I observed all of them. 6 months ago, I received an automated alert, one I established years ago on my parents' credit profiles, a hard inquiry from the Small Business Administration. I found it peculiar. My father's construction company has been defunct for 10 years. Therefore, I performed my duty. I investigated. I tapped the tablet screen. A new document materialized. This, I stated, is the SBA loan application for $300,000, submitted by Thompson Legacy Consulting. And here, I swiped, is the supporting documentation you, Marcus, submitted to obtain that loan. I enlarged the image. These are the profit and loss statements for your phantom company. $500,000 in revenue last quarter. Marcus, your company lacks a website. It lacks a business checking account, not linked to Mum's savings. These figures are a complete and frankly amateurish work of fiction. Marcus attempted to bore a hole through the table with his stare. He would not regard me. But this, I said, swiping again, is the issue. I enlarged the signature page. 2 signatures, Elijah Thompson, Brenda Thompson. These are proficient forgeries, Marcus. You have ample practice over the years signing my name on permission slips, correct? However, a digital signature carries a timestamp and an IP address. This one, I said, tapping the screen, was signed at 2:14 a.m. from your home IP address, not my parents' residence. My father looked at the screen, then at his son. You signed my name? That constitutes bank fraud, Ms. Davis added calmly, a federal offense. But that, I said, my voice dropping, was merely the appetizer. That is the loan you defaulted upon. The other one, the $300,000 one, the second mortgage causing them to forfeit this house, that one is even more severe. I swiped to a new file. This one was a video. You see, I said, observing my parents. For this one, Marcus required your authentic signatures. He could not merely forge them, therefore he deceived you. Deceived, my mother whispered. He provided you a stack of documents. He termed it a business guarantee. He claimed it was merely precautionary, in case he defaulted. However, buried within that stack, on page 11, was a quitclaim deed, a document transferring partial ownership of your settled house directly to his company. No, my father said, shaking his head. No, he would not. He did, I said. You signed your own home away, and you did not even read it. But that still was not the final step. To obtain the funds, the bank required one final signature on the loan disbursement document, the withdrawal slip, essentially. And Marcus knew he could never acquire your signature for that. Therefore, he had another individual execute it. I looked at Ashley. She commenced to tremble, a tiny, nearly invisible quiver. He did not sign it, I said. He was too intelligent for that. I pressed play. The conference room filled with silent, grainy, black and white footage from a bank security camera. The timestamp indicated 6 months prior. We observed Marcus, attired in one of his flashy suits, seated at a loan officer's desk. He was smiling, charming the officer. There is Marcus, I narrated as if presenting to a boardroom, and there is the loan officer, sliding the final disbursement document across the desk. We watched as Marcus retrieved the pen, but he did not sign. He turned, laughing regarding something, and handed the pen and document to the individual beside him, a person who had been just off camera, a person with long blonde hair. And here, I said, my voice hard as diamonds, is the individual who signed the name Brenda Thompson to steal $300,000. I tapped the screen. The video froze. I enlarged the image. The camera was directly above the desk. We observed the document. We observed the pen. and we observed the face of the woman holding it, her hand moving as she forged my mother's signature. It was Ashley. The room's silence was absolute. It was a vacuum. My mother, Brenda, looked from the frozen image on the tablet to the living, breathing, pallid woman seated across from her. Ashley, my mother whispered. It was a question, a plea, a denial. My father simply stared. He had been betrayed by his son. But this was a different echelon. This was a conspiracy. Ashley's face crumpled, the pretty, condescending mask she had worn for years shattered into countless fragments. She was white as a sheet, her eyes wide with pure animal terror. She stammered, looking wildly around the room. I did not know. I was unaware of its nature. She turned on Marcus, her voice abruptly becoming a desperate, hysterical shriek echoing off the glass walls. He instructed me, Marcus, inform them, you compelled me. She was standing now, pointing at him, tears streaming down her face. You instructed me to execute it. You claimed it was merely a formality, a procedural matter. You stated. She emitted a choked sob, and the final pathetic truth emerged. You claimed my handwriting more closely resembled your mother's than yours. You instructed me to sign it. You compelled me. She had just confessed, in an attorney's office, before all of us. She had just admitted to a felony. Marcus stared at her. His face was not panicked. It was a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. This woman, his partner, his ride or die, had just sealed his fate to preserve herself. He lunged across the table, or attempted to, his hands grasping for her. You are fabricating, he roared, his voice breaking. You fabricator! Elijah had to seize his arm to restrain him. It was your concept, Marcus screamed, his face purple, spittle flying from his mouth. It was you were the frightened one. You were terrified of impoverishment. You were the one perpetually stating, we must act, Marcus. We shall lose everything. You pressured me. You instructed me to be aggressive. You claimed they owed us. And there it was, the golden couple, the legacy, the perfect, successful, enviable pair. They were merely two common, terrified criminals, tearing each other asunder to determine who would bear the consequence. The alliance was fractured. The house of cards had thoroughly and violently collapsed. My father and mother simply sat, frozen. They were stunned. The explosion between Marcus and Ashley was merely noise. The genuine wound, the one I observed them both processing, was the video. It was Ashley. My father had been betrayed by his son, the one upon whom he had pinned all his hopes. But my mother had been betrayed by the daughter she had selected. Brenda had always criticized me, but she adored Ashley. Ashley was the one she shopped with. Ashley was the one sufficiently sophisticated, sufficiently light, to be the public face of the subsequent Thompson generation. Ashley was everything I was not, and Ashley had just been captured on video, forging my mother's signature to steal her home. My mother, Brenda, slowly turned her head, her eyes wide and filled with a new horrifying comprehension, fixed upon her daughter-in-law. You, Brenda whispered, her voice trembling, you perpetrated this against me. You occupied my table. You consumed my food. After all I performed for you. Her voice commenced to rise, acquiring a hysterical edge unrelated to finances and entirely related to a profound personal injury. I treated you as my own daughter. I informed my friends you were my daughter, and you smiled in my face while you... Ashley, perceiving her final potential ally turn against her, snapped. The faux tears vanished, replaced by a raw, ugly, entitled rage. Me? She shrieked, her voice cracking. You performed nothing for me. You performed nothing for him. She pointed a trembling finger at Marcus. You provided us nothing. You merely discourse. You discourse regarding legacy and the Thompson name and the community, but no money existed. The words struck my parents like a physical blow. Nothing existed, Ashley continued, her voice now a desperate wail of self-justification. Merely this house and your pride. Marcus merited more. He merited a genuine commencement. I merited more. I did not marry into this family to be impoverished. So there it was, the entire pathetic truth. The golden boy was a fraud, and his perfect wife was merely a gold digger who had arrived at an empty vault. While they all stared at her, this monster they had invited into their lives, I decided to deliver the final piece of data. I cleared my throat. They all regarded me as if just recalling my presence. She is correct regarding one aspect, I said, my voice slicing through the emotional wreckage. No money exists. I looked at Marcus. That $500,000 contract you proclaimed at Thanksgiving, Marcus, the one that rendered Dad so proud. Marcus, who had sunk into his chair, refused to meet my gaze. That was a falsehood, I stated as if reading from a report. My tedious job grants me access to specific databases, public records. I conducted a search on you, Marcus, and on Thompson Legacy Consulting. You did not sign a contract. You filed for Chapter 7 personal bankruptcy. You filed last Friday morning, the day of the Black Friday chaos. You lack a single cent to your name, correct? This was the conclusion. This was the ultimate fatal blow to the Golden Boy myth. He was not merely a failure. He was not merely a thief. He was a destitute thief, a complete and total fabrication from his expensive suit to his fictitious contracts. My father, Elijah, did not move. He did not shout. He did not regard me or Ashley or Brenda. He simply stared at his son. He stared at Marcus, the son he had championed, the son for whom he had sacrificed his daughter, the son he had loved, and the son who was nothing. He did not speak for an entire minute. The silence was heavier than any screaming had been. When he finally opened his mouth, his voice was a hollow, empty shell. It was the sound of a man whose entire world had just disintegrated into dust. He looked at Marcus, and with a quiet, devastating finality, he said, You have demolished this family. You have demolished all of us. Marcus merely wept. Pathetic, silent tears. The emotional segment of the meeting concluded. Now the business segment commenced. Ms. Davis, my attorney, who had observed this entire implosion with the quiet patience of a vulture, straightened the papers before her. Well, she said, her voice crisp and resonant, returning the room to attention. Now that everything is perfectly lucid, my client, Ms. Imani Thompson, possesses a proposal. The screaming finally subsided. Marcus and Ashley occupied opposite ends of their side of the table, breathing heavily, refusing to regard each other. They were finished. My mother wept into her hands. My father simply stared at the granite tabletop, his reflection observing him, a broken elderly man. All power in the room, all arrogance, all legacy had drained from them, and it had all flowed to my side of the table. Ms. Davis permitted the heavy, toxic silence to hang for a full minute, allowing the reality of their situation to settle upon them like a shroud. She then very deliberately straightened her papers, the crisp shush of the movement causing them all to flinch. Now that all parties, she declared, her eyes sweeping over them, are in full possession of the facts. My client, Ms. Imani Thompson, possesses a proposal. 4 pairs of eyes snapped to me, not with defiance, not with anger, but with a desperate animal fear. They were drowning, and I was the sole individual on the shore. Brenda, my mother, was the first to speak, her voice a raw, desperate croak. Imani, please, the house, I disregard the car. I disregard everything else, but the house, your father's house. Please, you cannot permit them to seize our home. I observed her, and then my father, his home. The house that was a monument to his pride. The house that was never a home to me. It was merely the stage for their performances. The location where I was the permanent, unthanked, invisible stagehand. I permitted them to wait. I permitted them to sit in that terrible, suffocating silence, the one they had so frequently compelled me to endure. Finally, I spoke. I shall preserve the house. The relief flooding the room was a physical entity. It was repulsive. Brenda emitted a sound, a sob of pure, unadulterated gratitude, as if I had just bestowed a miracle upon her. Elijah, my father, looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed, a flicker of disbelief, and, indeed, hope in his gaze. Even Marcus, the architect of this entire disaster, lifted his head, a pathetic, hopeful expression on his tear-stained face. They believed I was bluffing. They believed I had arrived to intimidate them, and now, having made my point, reliable, responsible Imani would intervene and resolve everything. They believed the former dynamic had returned. They believed I had arrived to rectify the situation. I permitted the hope to hang for a second, and then I rescinded it. But, I said, that single word, it resembled a gunshot. Everyone froze. But not for you. My mother's hopeful expression crumbled into confusion. What do you signify, darling? I signify, I said, leaning forward. I am not settling Marcus's $300,000 fraudulent loan. Those funds are vanished. I am not discarding sound money after bad. That would constitute a terrible financial decision. But the foreclosure, my father stammered. I shall permit the foreclosure to proceed, I stated calmly. No, Brenda shrieked, lunging forward. Permit me to conclude, I said, and my voice was so cold, so final, that she actually resumed her seat. I shall permit the bank to foreclose, I continued, and at the foreclosure auction, I shall be the sole and primary bidder. I shall purchase the house, free and clear of all your debts, from the bank. It shall be my property. The deed shall be in my name, and my name exclusively. The reality of my statement commenced to dawn upon them. My father's face transitioned from pale to red to a shade of purple I recalled from Thanksgiving. You vulture, he whispered, his voice trembling with a new rage. You would execute that? You would evict us? Your own parents? Following all this? You would evict us onto the street? He was so predictable, perpetually the victim. No, Dad, I said. I nearly smiled. I shall not evict you. I am not you. I am not as cruel as you are. He stared at me, bewildered. I shall lease it to you, I said. A total, blank, uncomprehending silence. I shall be your new landlord, I explained, as if to a child. I shall have Ms. Davis here draft a formal, legally binding lease agreement. You and Mom may remain in the house, my house. I leaned in, savoring the moment. The rent shall be $1 monthly, a symbolic, binding contract you shall sign. I observed my father, the man who had screamed at me, the man who had disowned me. So that henceforth, for the remainder of your lives, each instance you traverse that front door, each instance you repose in that master bedroom, each instance you host a gathering in that backyard, you shall remember. You shall remember that you are residing there, solely and completely, by the grace and the charity of the daughter you declared was not your child. I looked at him. You shall never, ever forget again who settles the bills. This was the genuine revenge, not homelessness, not poverty, but humiliation, a public, permanent, inescapable reversal of power. They would retain their house, their precious community appearance, but they would forfeit everything else: their pride, their authority, their legacy. They would be tenants in their own kingdom, and I would be the sovereign. My father uttered nothing. He simply shattered. He placed his head in his hands and his shoulders commenced to shake. Miss Davis, perceiving the first segment of the proposal had been fully comprehended, slid another set of documents across the table, tapping them with her pen. "And that," she said, her voice returning the room to a sharp, cold focus, "brings us to the second condition, the one concerning Mr. Marcus Thompson and Miss Ashley." My father's quiet sobs were a strange, hollow sound in the sterile room. My mother stared at him, her face a mask of blank shock. The house was preserved, but their pride was extinct. They had been reduced to tenants in their own lives. But I was not finished. That was merely the condition for my parents. Now it was time for the architects of the fraud. My gaze shifted, moving from my parents and locking onto my brother, Marcus, and his wife, Ashley. They sat huddled, pale and silent, like two criminals in the dock, awaiting the judge to pronounce their sentence. I observed Marcus. "You and Ashley are an entirely distinct matter." Ms. Davis, my attorney, retrieved a thick stack of printed evidence. The video stills, the bank statements, the forged signatures, the fictitious profit and loss reports. She tapped the stack on the table, a sound resembling a gavel. "As we have established," I said, my voice clinical, "what you two have committed is not merely familial betrayal. It is bank fraud. It is identity theft. It is wire fraud." I permitted those words to permeate. These were not familial squabbles. These were federal crimes. My occupation, my tedious occupation, involves collaborating with federal prosecutors on cases precisely like this. Nearly every month, I said. I comprehend precisely what this evidence signifies, and I comprehend precisely the penalty. I leaned in, and for the inaugural time, I permitted a cold, hard smile to touch my lips. With this file, with the bank's testimony and my parents' testimony, a prosecutor would not require exertion. You would both be contemplating a minimum of 10 years in a federal penitentiary. 10 years. The blood did not merely drain from Marcus's and Ashley's faces. It was as if their very life force had been suctioned from the room. Ashley emitted a small, choking sound, resembling a dying animal. Marcus appeared as if he might be physically ill. The vision of his tailored suits and flashy cars evaporated, replaced by the reality of a drab, orange jumpsuit and a steel cot. "I possess this entire file," I said, tapping the stack. "Prepared for submission, a telephone call. That is all it would necessitate. One call from Ms. Davis to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and your lives, as you recognize them, conclude." Marcus regarded me, his eyes finally exhibiting the one emotion he had never before shown me: pure, unadulterated terror. He was, at last, genuinely afraid of me. "I shall not contact the police," I said. A tiny, impossible spark of hope flickered in their eyes. "But," Ms. Davis, on cue, slid another set of documents across the granite table. These were not evidence. These were contracts. "This," Ms. Davis stated, her voice sharp, "is a full and binding legal confession and a relinquishment agreement." I observed Marcus. "You, Marcus, shall sign this document. It declares unequivocally that you relinquish perpetually any and all claim to the Thompson family assets, any inheritance, any property, any funds, present or future. You receive nothing. You are officially and legally severed." I then regarded Ashley. "And you shall sign it as his spouse, agreeing to the identical terms. Your complementary journey concludes. And subsequently, I continued, you are both going to sign this document. I tapped the second file. This is your full confession. It details every crime: the SBA loan, the forged signatures, the mortgage fraud, the theft from my accounts, everything. You shall sign it and you shall have it notarized. And this confession shall be retained by Ms. Davis in her vault. It is my insurance policy, I explained. The moment you or Ashley ever transgress, the moment I discover you are attempting to defraud anyone ever again, the moment you ever disrespect my parents or me, Ms. Davis shall personally transport this confession to the federal prosecutor. I shall possess you for the remainder of your lives. This was the genuine prison, not one of steel bars, but one of paper, a life sentence of my control. Marcus was slumped, his head in his hands. He was a broken man. He possessed nothing, no money, no future, no escape. And one final aspect, I said. I stood walking to the window, observing the Atlanta skyline. You, I said, observing my brother's reflection in the glass, are going to obtain employment, authentic employment, not a fictitious consulting firm, not a get-rich-quick scheme. Authentic, 9 to 5. Or in your instance, I believe, 9 to 5 is not quite appropriate. I turned and regarded him. I conducted research this morning. The Amazon Fulfillment Center, the substantial one in Union City, they are hiring for the night shift, selecting and packaging boxes. It is 10 hours nightly, 4 days weekly. It compensates $19 hourly. I permitted the number to hang in the air, $19 hourly. I believe, I said, a small, cruel smile playing on my lips, it would be an impeccable fit for a man with your ambition and energy. You, Marcus, the $500,000 CEO, are going to labor in a warehouse. You are going to learn, for the inaugural time in your 35 years, what it genuinely feels like to settle the bills. My brother was a wreck, my sister-in-law was catatonic, and my parents were vanquished. The entire Thompson legacy had been dismantled in less than an hour, entirely by the daughter who was not family. My father, Elijah, had been silent since I announced Marcus would labor in a warehouse. He had not moved. He simply sat there, staring at the polished granite table, observing the reflection of a man he no longer recognized. Finally, he looked up. His eyes were red, not with anger anymore, but with a deep, crushing, profound confusion. He regarded me, not as a monarch, not as a tyrant, but as a broken elderly man. His voice, when he finally spoke, was merely a ragged whisper. It was the question he was most terrified to pose. Why? I simply observed him. Why, Imani? He inquired, his voice cracking. Why did you execute it? All this duration, all those funds. Why did you conceal for him? Why did you bear all of this? Why did you permit it to persist? He was inquiring why I had protected them. He was inquiring why I had permitted them to treat me thus for so long. This was it, the ultimate payoff, the one unrelated to money or houses or prison. This was the emotional truth. I observed my father, the man whose approval I had starved for my entire existence. Because I have executed it previously, Dad, I said, my voice quiet. He regarded me, bewildered. What are you discussing? I'm discussing 10 years ago, I said. I'm discussing when I was 22, preparing to graduate from college. I'm discussing Thompson Construction, your company, the one of which you are so proud. His blood turned cold. I could perceive it. He comprehended what I was about to reveal. I am discussing when your company collapsed, I said, my voice clear and steady. When it declared bankruptcy, because you refused to modernize, because you were an atrocious financial manager, because you drove it into the ground with your pride. No, he whispered. Affirmative, I said. And when the creditors were calling and the bank was seizing your assets and you were about to be publicly, humiliatingly, ruined and declared a bankrupt failure, who do you believe intervened? He simply stared at me. It was I whispered. I, 22-year-old Imani. I utilized my entire college savings, the funds I had earned from scholarships. I obtained additional student loans I am still repaying today, and I secretly, quietly settled your final debts. I negotiated with the creditors. I preserved your name, the precious Thompson name, from the bankruptcy filings. I prevented your destruction. The truth was finally revealed. He was not a successful man. He was a failure, and I had been rectifying his disasters and his son's disasters for my entire adult life. I executed it, I said, the words heavy, because I did not desire to witness your destruction. I protected your legacy, your authentic one, because I loved you. I permitted that to hang in the air. Marcus, he merely desired the name so he could vend it. I merely desired to protect the man. I observed him, my eyes clear and for the inaugural time, free of any tears. I expended 10 years protecting a father who, at the initial indication of trouble, looked me in the eye and informed me I was not his child. Imani, he choked out. Therefore you inquired why? I said, that is why. But on Thanksgiving night, Dad, when you screamed those words at me, you finally liberated me. Ashley did not even await for the ink to dry on the confession. She was the first to depart that attorney's office, and she never glanced back. The ride or die loyalty she professed was valid only while the ride was in a Lexus. The instant she comprehended the Thompson legacy was a bankrupt, toxic sham, she concluded, she could not endure the humiliation. She had not merely married a man, she had married a status. She had relished being the perfect white wife in a powerful, affluent black family. But a poor, shamed black family? That was not included in her 5-year plan. She filed for divorce within 48 hours of our meeting. She likely believed she could at least obtain half of something, but she had forgotten the prenuptial agreement, the very document she had insisted upon when she believed Marcus was the subsequent great Atlanta entrepreneur. She desired to protect his future millions for herself. But the prenup was ironclad. It stated in unequivocal legal terms that any assets acquired through fraudulent means were null and void. And since all their assets were fraudulent, she was entitled to precisely nothing. She departed the marriage with the identical items she brought into it. Several suitcases of expensive attire and a mountain of credit card debt in her own name. She was last observed waitressing at a chain restaurant in Alpharetta, distant from the Buckhead social scene she once craved. And the Cartier watch? I had the bank repossess it. It was, after all, purchased with a stolen identity. She departed with absolutely and definitively nothing. And Marcus? Marcus did not possess the luxury of vanishing. He was ensnared by the confession he had signed. He was my puppet, and I held all the strings, and he was completely, utterly destitute. The bankruptcy filing proceeded, eliminating his non-existent assets and finalizing his status as a financial pariah. Banks would not approach him. Therefore, he accepted the occupation. He genuinely executed it. The great Marcus Thompson, the family pride, reported to the Amazon Fulfillment Center in Union City for the 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. graveyard shift. I heard through the grapevine the initial weeks nearly shattered him. The physical labor was something his soft, privileged physique had never experienced. He who previously boasted about closing deals was now merely attempting to meet his pick rate. scanning and packaging boxes under harsh, humming fluorescent lights. But the physical exhaustion was nothing compared to the social humiliation. Within our tight-knit community, information travels rapidly. The narrative was not regarding the crime. I had maintained that segment confidential, as promised. The narrative that leaked was, in certain aspects, even worse. Marcus Thompson, the boy genius, was a complete fraud. He had not earned $1. He had been subsisting on his tedious younger sister for years. He was a parasite. The invitations ceased, the fawning friends vanished. His telephone became silent. He lost his wife, he lost his vehicle, he lost his status. He relocated to a depressing beige-walled studio apartment in College Park, the variety with thin walls and a view of the highway. For the inaugural time in his 35 years of existence, Marcus Thompson was genuinely, authentically settling his own bills, with the blisters on his hands as proof. And regarding my parents, Elijah and Brenda, I maintained my promise. I permitted the bank to seize the house, and then I purchased it. The deed was transferred to my name. The house my father had constructed his identity upon was now merely another asset in my portfolio. I had Ms. Davis transmit the new lease to them, the $1 monthly lease. My father signed it and returned it by mail without a word. They still reside there. To the external world, nothing has altered. The lawn remains manicured. The house remains the largest on the cul-de-sac. But internally, it is a mausoleum. The power is extinct. My father, Elijah, the man of ambition who disowned me, is a broken man. He no longer roars. He barely speaks. He simply occupies his armchair, a silent, guilty spectre, a tenant in the house he once governed. My mother, Brenda, attempted a different tactic. She attempted to pretend it never occurred. Following several weeks of silence, the telephone calls commenced. Imani, darling, I am preparing your preferred Sunday dinner. Pot roast. Why not visit? I did not answer. She would text me. Imani, sweetheart, I observed this dress at Saks. It would appear exquisite on you. I contemplated you. I did not reply. She continued, attempting to rectify it, to smooth it over, to pull me back into the former role of the dutiful daughter. She still has not realized the daughter she is contacting no longer exists. They possess their roof, they possess their status, but they have forfeited everything that mattered. They lost their pride and joy, Marcus, to a warehouse, and they lost the daughter they discarded, who now possesses the key to their front door. 6 months have elapsed since that day in the attorney's office, 6 months since I signed the documents, rendering me the owner of my childhood home. 6 months since I departed from the wreckage of the Thompson legacy and commenced, for the inaugural time, to genuinely construct my own. My condominium, the tiny apartment my father previously mocked, is my sanctuary. It is no longer a location to conceal. It is a location to live. In the mornings, the Atlanta sun floods through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the entire space is illuminated. I have filled it with plants, substantial, leafy fiddle-leaf figs and monsteras, life flourishing in every corner. My former existence felt grey and suffocating, lived in the shadow of my brother's fabricated success. This new existence is bright, it is clean, it is mine. That brightness is not merely in my home, it is in my career. 2 weeks ago, my supervisor summoned me to his office. I was not in difficulty. I was not being overlooked. I was being promoted. I am now the Director of Risk Analysis for the entire Southeastern region. It was the promotion I had quietly merited for 2 years, but had been too exhausted, too emotionally drained from my other full-time occupation of managing my family's disasters, to genuinely pursue. It is astonishing what you can achieve when you are no longer a full-time crisis manager for ungrateful individuals. It is incredible how much energy you possess when you are not pouring it into a black hole of need and entitlement. All that focus, all that drive, it is all mine now, and it is yielding dividends. I zipped my suitcase. It is a brand new, sleek, hard-shell carry-on. My previous one was scuffed and worn, dragged on far too many obligatory, joyless journeys to my parents' house for holidays that felt more like summonses than invitations. But I am not packing for a tense Thanksgiving. I am not packing for a performative Christmas dinner. I am packing for myself. In 3 hours, I have a flight to Lisbon. For 2 weeks. 2 solid weeks in Portugal. A journey I have fantasized about for 5 years. A journey I perpetually informed myself I could not afford or lacked time for. But that was a falsehood. I could always afford it. The truth was, I was expending my Portugal funds on my mother's car payments. I was expending my Lisbon funds on the interest for my brother's fraudulent loans. No longer. This is not merely a vacation, it is a reclamation. I inspected my watch. My airport transportation awaited downstairs. I seized my passport, and just as I experienced that initial, authentic, uncomplicated thrill of anticipation, my building's intercom buzzed, not my telephone, my intercom, which signified someone was physically in my lobby. I frowned. I was not expecting anyone. I approached and pressed the video button. My heart did not cease, but it performed a peculiar little kick. It was my mother, Brenda, standing in my gleaming modern lobby, appearing small and misplaced. She was holding a foil-covered dish. A segment of me, a weary, ancient segment, desired to simply ignore it, but I did not. I pressed the button to permit her ascent. I opened my apartment door and simply waited. She walked slowly down the hallway, her steps hesitant. She appeared older. The defiance was extinct. The arrogance had evaporated. She was merely a woman. She halted several feet from my door, not daring to enter. She extended the pie dish. It remained warm. Imani, darling, she commenced, her voice small and soft. I realize you are occupied. I desired to thank you. You comprehend for the house, for everything. She attempted a small, watery smile. I prepared your favorite, sweet potato pie. I simply observed her. Then I glanced down at the pie in her hands, the pie with the perfectly fluted crust, the pie I had observed her prepare for Marcus, and exclusively for Marcus, every single Thanksgiving and Christmas of my entire existence. The pie that I, as a child, was prohibited from cutting until Marcus had taken the inaugural, perfect slice. The pie I did not even favor. My voice was not angry, it was not cold, it was merely quiet and honest. I do not favor sweet potato pie, Mum. She blinked, the smile freezing on her face. What, sweetheart? I have never favored sweet potato pie, I said gently. You are aware. That is Marcus's preferred. I looked her directly in the eye. My preferred has perpetually been apple. The realization, the profound 2-decade-old gaping realization, washed over her face. It was devastating. She glanced down at the pie in her hands as if she had just recognized it was poison. She was not merely holding a pie. She was holding the physical evidence of her neglect. She had arrived to apologize, and in the very act had revealed she did not even comprehend to whom she was apologizing. She had never, not once, genuinely perceived me. "Oh," she whispered, her hand trembled. "Oh, God, I reached down and retrieved the handle of my new suitcase. I observed her, not with hatred, but with a final, sorrowful, settled pity. "I must depart, Mum," I said, my voice gentle yet firm. "I shall miss my flight." I did not await for her to cry. I did not await for her to apologize anew. "Have a pleasant day." and I slowly, deliberately, and quietly closed the door, leaving her standing alone in the hallway, holding a futile pie and finally, on the opposing side of my existence. As I traversed the bright, open terminal of Hartsfield Jackson Airport, pulling my new suitcase behind me, I felt a smile upon my face. It was not a smug smile or a bitter one. It was merely light. I finally comprehended. The sweetest revenge was not that instant in the attorney's office. It was not about demolishing them or compelling them to pay, or even the warehouse. The sweetest revenge was reclaiming everything they had stolen from me, fragment by fragment, my funds, my time, the truth, and most significantly, my peace. They perpetually inform you that you cannot select your family, and perhaps that is accurate, but you can absolutely select the precise moment you cease paying the emotional and financial invoice for their toxicity. You can elect to cease setting yourself ablaze merely to maintain their warmth. Occasionally, I realized, forfeiting the family you believed you possessed, the one you struggled so intensely to be acknowledged by, is the sole manner you can finally, genuinely discover yourself. Have you ever had to make a challenging choice similar to that? A choice to protect your own peace from the very individuals who are supposed to be your safe harbor. Do you believe, as I now do, that financial independence is not merely regarding money, but that it is the ultimate key to personal freedom? What would you have executed in my circumstance? I would adore to peruse your narratives and your reflections in the comment section below. Please do not forget to like and subscribe to Ken Funu Duyen and share this video. Share it with anyone in your existence who might require to hear this, who might require a reminder that it is never ever too late to close one door and reserve a flight from another. The ultimate lesson from Imani's narrative is that financial independence is the ultimate form of self-defense. For years, her skills and her income were utilized as a secret resource to sustain a family that publicly disrespected her. They perceived her stability as a utility, not as a strength. Her power was not merely in exposing the fraud, it was in her financial capacity to cease enabling their toxicity. Authentic freedom commences the moment you cease setting yourself ablaze, merely to maintain others warm. Your worth is not negotiable. Never ever finance your own mistreatment. Thank you for listening.